My name is Jeff Wilson. I'm the founder of a company called 352. 352 is the company that created the Enterprise Entrepreneurship Series, the event series that you all are at today. We've been doing this now for a little bit over 2 years. This is the event you guys are at today as part of a monthly event series we've been doing to really promote corporate innovation in Atlanta, bringing together corporate innovators and those who support corporate innovation in our community together to have a discussion with those who lead corporate innovation efforts in our community. And we've got one of those discussions that's going to take place today. This is going to be a wonderful session. I'm really glad that you guys chose to come. So my company, 352, we're one of those who supports corporate innovation in Atlanta. We're a company based in Tech Square that works with a lot of the Fortune 1000 companies in Atlanta to help take them out of innovation theory and put them into innovation do mode through co-creation, through methodologies such as design sprints, rapid prototyping, and customer studies. And we're excited to be putting this event on today in conjunction with some wonderful partners. First of all, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, who donated this wonderful space to us to be able to host this event today. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to be up here before, but I've been up to a couple meetings here and was really excited about coming back and getting to use this space and taking in the absolutely amazing views of Atlanta. So I wanted to give a special thank you today. A round of applause to the Metro Atlanta Chamber for hosting us. And also helping us put on today's event is the Highwire Group. And you're going to meet Alex Gonzalez, who's the CEO of the Highwire Group, here in just a moment. But first, I wanted to start by introducing our speaker. We have a fabulous speaker today. Drew Panayiotou is from Chick-fil-A. He came to Chick-fil-A to lead the company's new ventures and incubator group about a little over a year ago, after 3 years as president and CEO of BBDO Atlanta. Prior to that, he was the SVP of US marketing for Best Buy. Really neat position. In that role, he led all US marketing functions for Best Buy, retail stores, as well as BestBuy.com, which is the 12th largest e-commerce site in the US. He radically restructured the entire marketing organization, making large shifts to digital media and leading one of the most sophisticated CRM and loyalty programs. He's also developed a wealth of knowledge and insights from more than 20 years experience in a variety of marketing roles with brands such as Johnson & Johnson, Kodak, Hershey's, Dr. Pepper, and Coca-Cola, including leading the startup of the Venturing and Emerging Brands Group at Coca-Cola. And prior to joining Best Buy, this excited me the most when I read this. He was the global marketing lead for Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. And personally, having 3 kids under the age of 7, I appreciate the great marketing that they do, much of which you probably set in motion there. He is a graduate of Boston College and also got an MBA from Duke University. So first of all, welcome, Drew. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And Drew is going to be interviewed today by Alex Gonzalez. Alex Gonzalez, many of you probably know, he's a corporate innovation strategy, brand and culture advisor, speaker, and author. He has over 20 years experience at several Fortune 500 and 1000 companies where he held a variety of senior executive roles, including leading global strategy and innovation functions and running major divisions as a P&L leader. And he is currently the CEO of Highwire Group, a company focused on enabling innovators and their companies to embrace transformative thinking and innovate fearlessly. He is also the producer and host of the new Disruptor Studio series. He's actively involved with helping to grow the Atlanta innovation ecosystem. He's a board member here at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. And he works with them on a program called Innovation Connect, which links our region's most senior innovation executives with the growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Come on up, guys. Without further ado, Alex and Drew.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks again for letting us work with you on this wonderful EES here today. And Jennifer, thanks for hosting us as well. And Drew, nice to see you.
Nice to
see
see you.
far, listen.
A little bit distance.
A little bit, that's all right. So first of all, this is one of my favorite things to do here in terms of, part of my job is to not just work with companies on innovation, but to talk to great innovators. And here in Atlanta, there's so many incredible innovators, so many great innovation stories that are untold, and I'm very excited today about today, Drew, as you know, we're talking about Red Wagon, because I think people are going to leave. I think people have a certain perception today, and they're probably already amazed, and they're going to be blown away by the time we're done when we understand about Red Wagon. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about you. And you talk about this incredible background. You have all these wonderful brands from Spy to Walt Disney, Johnson & Johnson. It seems like you were there at transformative times. So what's kind of been the common kind of thread or theme when you're going into some of these big brands in your career?
Yeah, I'm a glutton for change. I love it. I'm addicted to it. And it's been interesting because I don't know what it is. I've always been attracted to jumping into dynamic environments. I think that's the key thing. Everyone's got the thing that motivates them. For me, it's like jumping into big pots that are changing quickly. And it's had the good, bad, and the ugly. I tell people, you look at my resume and it says the head of digital innovation for Kodak. I don't know if that's like a wonderful crowning moment. But I learned a lot, and I took it to other places. But it's been great to have that experience where things clearly did not work. It gave me a visibility into why companies struggle with innovation. And then I was at Best Buy, and that's been a great story. It's one of the few companies that has really held its own and made progress with Amazon. I got a text yesterday when they announced a big partnership with Jeff Bezos. So there's been highs like that, and so it's been interesting to see the forces that drive success versus those that don't drive success.
And Best Buy was a company that, probably around that same time, that whole segment of retail was really under attack, and Circuit City going under and so forth. So you've seen some transformational times in the industries as well too.
Yeah.
So you were at Coke, and so definitely tell us a little bit about that. But I really want to get into an element of a segment a lot of people don't know about, which is venturing brands. So tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. So at Coke, I was the global VP on Sprite and Fanta, and literally got tapped one day by a man named Derek Van Rensburg, and he was basically asked by Mutar to create a new business venture that would go after driving new beverage brands. And so I was employee, I think, number 2 or 3 of that group. Yeah. And it's been a great success story. It's, I think, over 10 years old now. And we built kind of the first, I'd say, really successful incubating / innovation groups at the company. And I still go back to it frequently. I bring Dan, Kathy, my current boss, over to look at the team and what they've done. And they've been able to create a lot of growth with brands like Honest Tea, Fairlife, which is a big milk brand, coconut water brand, just a whole slew of new beverages for Coca-Cola.
Right. And how do you work through the kind of the culture and something like that? Because it seems like it's something very different from the core. It's kind of getting into what you were even doing at Chick-fil-A. But how do you kind of address that?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is embracing reality.
Yeah.
And sometimes, when people can embrace the reality of the situation, you can really innovate. So at Coke, there were many examples of teams like this that did not succeed. Yeah. Innovation struggled. Everyone remembers stories of Fruitopia and brands like this. And I think embracing the fact that Coke didn't do the building of new brands well, it set up the model that it has now, which is partnering with entrepreneurs, not going to buy companies and then trying to plug them into an ecosystem, but partnering with entrepreneurs, leveraging the passion of entrepreneurs, and investing in those companies, and then bringing them some benefits that you have from being a scaled organization, and then going on a ride. Right. And letting them control their companies, letting them innovate, because you have to have some humility. Right. To recognize that there's something wonderful about entrepreneurs and how they are passionate and how they grow businesses and brands. Right. And that model has worked really well for Coke, but it required, I think, the organization to have a sense of humility and humbleness that, you know, not everyone on North Avenue has the answer. Not everyone is a genius. And when you embrace that, then you can move on. And I think that emotional state is an important one for companies if they're going to grow and innovate, is you have to get over that, hey, we've been doing it a certain way, we're the smartest people in the room, and so if we're going to innovate, it's got to happen from the inside out.
Right.
That's typically not how big disruptive ideas get launched into the world.
It sounds like it's also key for whoever's leading that segment has to have some corporate courage to help the company be patient as well too, as ideas evolve.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, again, just you have to carefully, you know, weave, because the way to innovate requires emotional engagement, and how you bring people along and how you maneuver around certain minefields in a large company is an art.
Absolutely. So let's say, by the way, you obviously spent some time at BBDO and dealt with a lot of other brands there. But at some point, you got a call from Dan and Dan Cathy and Chick-fil-A, and so we definitely want to dig into what is Red Wagon, because again, I would venture that 90% of the folks would probably get it wrong. But what was the pitch to you to come to Chick-fil-A for this new thing?
Yeah, you know, it was funny. I had a chance to know Dan for a bit.
Yeah.
Knew he was a very non-traditional thinker, and when he first approached me about this, I'm like, I'm the last person you need. I mean, you sell a whole lot of fried chicken. People love it. You know, you open up a Chick-fil-A anywhere and there are lines out the door. You certainly don't need Drew Panayiotou at Chick-fil-A. And Dan had told me that he and the executive committee at Chick-fil-A had read a book written by a man by the name of Vijay Gandharsavan. He's a Harvard, Dartmouth professor. He wrote this book called The Three-Box Solution, and it's a really good book. It's one of the few books. There's so many innovation books, but this is one of the few books I say is a must read, because it talks about the fact that there are different types of innovation. Innovation is a big, big word, and there's box one, which is in your core, and there are plenty of corporate innovation teams, and they should continue to do what they do, which is, you know, have a big gate process and manage risk and innovate in a very linear way. That's all important stuff. Then there's, you know, box two, and that's, you know, how do you kind of get a little bit apart from your core business. And then there's box three, which is how do you create the future? How do you literally create growth that lasts for decades? And that is the kind of growth that, you know, really successful companies like Amazon have done. You know, Amazon's not a 5-year-old company. They have magnificently found a way to build and create new businesses, as an Apple has done. And that is really, you know, I think what that book meant to Dan and the executive team at Chick-fil-A, because they look at things generationally. They have, you know, now a third generation, a fourth generation of Cathy family members, so they want to continue to grow and honor the entrepreneurial spirit of Truett Cathy. Right. And so after, long story short, after the executive committee read this book, spoke to Vijay, they decided to establish a budget and create a box three effort. It wasn't called Red Wagon.
Right.
We named it after I took the job with Dan. But I think it was the fact that the executive committee invested the time. They committed a real budget to it. And Dan passionately convinced me that it meant a lot to him. And unless you have a mandate from a CEO, it's almost impossible to do this kind of work. It has to be something that is a big part of the CEO's agenda. You have to report into the CEO. I report right into Dan, and we have a real budget.
Right.
And so I came on board, and we named it Red Wagon because Truett Cathy's very first business was not selling chicken. He was selling Coke out of a wooden wagon and that was his first business. And I learned later that when the weather got cooler, he'd pull out magazines, and he was selling magazines, so he was the consummate entrepreneur. And so Red Wagon really is about honoring his spirit, his very first business, and creating new companies.
And you know, it's interesting because you talked before about innovation lineage. It seems like that's important to the Cathy family and Cathy. And you know, if we think about it, I mean, for you, what are some other examples of some companies that are kind of starting to go down this path, particularly from an innovation lineage perspective?
You know, it's the companies that tend to have a very strong, I'd say, person or private ownership group.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Elon Musks, it's the Tesla, it's the Jeff Bezos, it's the companies that have someone who's not afraid to be daring.
Right.
And you know, Dan is a very daring CEO, and I think it's having the profile of that kind of leader, right. Who's not afraid to kind of step out of the box, not afraid to have conversations with analysts around what they're doing. So much of what kills innovation is the CFO discussion. The CFO discussion is a challenging one because most CFOs use, the first question is ROI, right? It's very tough to innovate when you're forced to come up with ideas that meet an investment hurdle that's based on a big core business. Yeah. So that usually kills off a bunch of ideas because, you know, a business that's been scaled for a long time has a pretty good ROI. So if you're using that metric, you might as well, you know, just pack up the innovation team because we're not going to do anything. So it's getting out of that mindset that you have to have this high hurdle, because if you're doing true disruptive innovation, you do not know. You have no idea. You are conducting experiments, and
you have to let yourself be confused for a while.
Yeah, you're going to be confused for a while, and anyone can make a spreadsheet hum. Yeah. But you know, to real innovation, you're taking a lot of risk and making a lot of guesses, right. and you're responding to weak signals. And I think that's something that Dan took away from this 3-box solution book, yeah. Is that real disruptive innovation, you're responding to a weak signal. So by default, it's not clear. So if the signal is weak, the P&L is not going to be clear. Right. So that's the first problem you have to attack, is get out of the mindset of traditional financial metrics. Right. And I would actually say that companies that innovate really well have tremendously strong and creative financial leaders. Right. And that's something that doesn't get well publicized. You know, usually the person who's building the stuff does, but behind a lot of that innovation are people that are creative on the financial side.
Yeah, and it seems like too, from your leadership perspective, you're talking about Dan and Cathy being completely behind this and really invested in this, but he's still quite an operator. So yeah. I think he's able to really shift his brain when he needs to adapt to what he's doing with his business.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about Red Wagon then. So it's a Red Wagon Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
And you know, obviously, so why don't you tell us what it is, and kind of how does it fit in the Chick-fil-A ecosystem relative to Hatch and Pinewood and kind of this whole kind of world that Dan's growing there?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So Pinewood is totally outside of Chick-fil-A. Right. It's a Dan and Cathy led initiative. I'm a different species. So I'm a group, legal entity established within the Chick-fil-A enterprise, and our job is basically to create new companies. So we sit inside of Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, we use the same accounting systems, the same HR systems. We have differences in how we incentivize people, but then we have total freedom to operate. And so Red Wagon is this group. It's an LLC actually within Chick-fil-A, and we have a budget that the company has given to us, and we use that budget to basically conduct experiments. and to go and look at the marketplace and look for opportunities for next generation retail. Dan believes that Chick-fil-A is an experience-based business. It goes far beyond the chicken sandwich, and it falls in the retail realm. You have real estate, you have people, you're selling something, people come to you, you take orders, and Dan believes that understanding and knowing next generation retail is important for his core business. And so our focus is creating new retail businesses, experiential retail businesses. And if we're successful, some of that capability could be brought back into the core. But we are about going out into the future and creating a new retail experience that doesn't exist today.
And to be clear, so if it involves food or in restaurants, you're not touching it.
Not touching it.
Not touching it.
Yeah.
So how do you go about? Well, first of all, let's go back because it's about retail experiences. What is that? What's kind of that basis for experience? Because I think it's important for people to know how Dan thinks about what really Chick-fil-A is.
Yeah.
It's you'd say it's an experience company, right?
Yeah, it is an experience company. I always say this, and someone wise at Chick-fil-A is having been somebody who spent a lot of time in marketing. This person says marketing is a tax for a bad product or service, and when I heard that at first, I'm like, wow. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in it because if you have a great experience and you have a great product, there is no reason you should ever discount it. And I've been part of organizations that have big promotional machines where they're constantly putting out coupons and deals. And you don't need to do that if you actually get the innovation thing right. And Dan believes that people come to Chick-fil-A not just for great food, but because it's a great experience. It's fast when you want it to be fast. The food is hot when it's supposed to be hot. It's clean. There's a hospitality part of the experience that's really important. And so that's why you don't see a lot of deals going around Chick-fil-A. And I think that's a great business principle. And I now look at couponing really differently. Because I do view it as a tax now. Because you should be taking some of that money and really investing it back into the core. And I think that's a great challenge for a CEO. It's like, how much are you promoting? And if you're promoting that much, what does that say about your product?
So then going after, being an experience company, you're going after next generation retail. So I know this is almost an impossible question to answer, but if you were to define next generation retail, what is that, or what is it not?
Yeah, I think next generation retail is I call it something that is, I think I invented it, so I don't think it's in any press or book, but retail as a service, where people are literally paying more because of the service that you're providing. Now that could mean I'm buying this widget, and I'm buying this widget at full price because the amazing experience and service that you're giving to me in buying that widget. Or it could just be the fact that I'm doing something for you and I'm providing a service and you're willing to pay for it. So it is experiential in that you are paying for something that you can't feel or touch necessarily. And that's either a premium on a product or you're just paying for the service itself.
And so what it probably is not, so if someone were to tell you, well, mobile order is that next generation retail, your threshold is a little different from that.
Yeah.
As well, too.
Yeah. No, I mean it has to be higher. I think particularly coming from a Best Buy, there are all these terms that we started throwing around, like omni-channel. I mean, how many times have you heard that? Let's have a website, talk to the stores. Let's provide the ability for you to kind of order online, pick up in store. These are all good little steps. But the next generation retail is an experience where you fundamentally walk out and you're like, wow, I experienced something that I may not be able to describe, but something that drew a reaction from me because it was amazing.
Right.
For example, one thing that we're working on is when you step into a retail box, the environment should respond based on who you are. That's next generation retail. When what happens around you changes, whether it's the walls, the screens, or the people that are coming up to you. They know who you are. They want to do something that is customized and personal for you, and that's really different than having a mobile phone in your pocket and ordering online.
Right. So it's not so much. It seems like what you and your team is doing is almost challenging every assumption out there as well too. So because it's interesting. So first of all, let me I guess ask. So why not something beyond next generation retail? Why not? Let's Chick-fil-A. Let's take on Google. Let's kind of go beyond that. What's kind of anchored you to that?
I think the wisdom in that, part of that too came from Dan and I thinking about it is, there are systems in place at Chick-fil-A that are around retail.
Right.
They have a real estate group. They have, understanding of retail finance. And so there's some things you can take from the core.
Right.
And so why wouldn't we start with the ability to leverage those things?
Right.
And then long term, the fact that Chick-fil-A could potentially benefit from one of the companies we create,
right.
makes retail make a lot of sense.
So I want to keep kind of going into this whole area of kind of how you go after kind of this next. But talk a little bit about kind of the interactions, just practical interactions between Chick-fil-A. It's a large organization, it's doing extremely well.
Yeah.
But you're not immune from all the typical things you get in corporate. And so, what is it like telling the Red Wagon story internally? How do you work? Like even with your own innovation center? How does that part go?
It's challenging, but almost the same experience that I had at Coca-Cola.
Okay.
So no company is unique, and every big company has an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Every big company has an ecosystem. And the thing about ecosystems is they're driven by humans. And humans have certain core things. One of them is self-preservation, right? We all want to preserve ourselves. We want to preserve something in our universe. And so when you create a far-out group, just like we did at Coke and just like Red Wagon, the first thing is like the ecosystem is like, what is this thing? We don't necessarily want it because it's so different. We can't explain it. We don't understand it. It challenges our own reason to be. So that's the response.
Right.
And that response is consistent at any big company. And it's even probably unlike Coke, where we knew the business was starting to get a little soft and people weren't drinking soft drinks like they used to. At Chick-fil-A, it's even more pronounced because the company is wildly successful. And change is really difficult in companies that are super successful because the case for change doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And so you're putting out a fire that no one sees.
Right.
And that makes it incredibly tough, which is why it's so important for me that Dan is so passionate about this, because you could spend months and months trying to convince people internally to see the world differently. And you may get a lot of Minnesota nice. When I was in Best Buy in Minneapolis, there was a term where people smiled. They almost look at you like, oh, you poor little thing. Nice to see you today. You can get a lot of that. And so you have to have a little bit of a thick skin because you shouldn't be expecting people to understand it. You shouldn't be expecting people internally to get it. That's because it's human nature for them not to.
Right. And it is a thing. Just one thing you mentioned, which just it's not just internal. Like talking about Dan, this is such a passion for his. And he's publicly gone out and talked about how Chick-fil-A will not become irrelevant under his watch, even if it's 20 years from now, which is a big part of Red Wagon in particular. So that's such a unique element, I think, having Dan with Chick-fil-A, what he's doing with Red Wagon.
It is so unique. I think
also gives you a lot of attention too, which could be good or bad depending on
yeah.
the day, right?
That's why sometimes I say I'm hiding. No, it's really unique because people like Dan look at what happens when you're not around, right?
Right.
And it is that mentality of constantly not being afraid to chart new ground, because you know the world's going to change. Change is the constant. And there is not one business, including the selling of chicken, that will defy gravity. So one thing I believe in is physics. Principles of physics are true. And businesses don't continue to grow forever.
Right.
That never happens. I don't know one business that has grown forever and had double-digit growth and has never stopped or slowed down. And that will happen to Chick-fil-A, it will happen to every company, unless you're really vigilant about breaking things and creating some tension. That's why I'm a huge fan of Amazon. I mean, they consistently go out and they're highly decentralized, and they go out and create new businesses, create new things, look at their capabilities differently. I don't think anyone would admit that there's not like some grand roadmap. I don't think Jeff Bezos has a roadmap that has 40 plays all mapped out, but he moves forward and then he pivots based on what he's seeing.
Right.
And I think the pivoting part is probably the most important thing for big companies, is can they pivot, can they change, can they stay nimble, and that means the executive team needs to act more nimbly.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about your team. You know, your job is to be nimble in this multi-billion-dollar organization. And so, it's kind of interesting. So Red Wagon is looking at the next generation of innovation, looking at next generation retail. We don't know exactly how it looks like, but we're going to go pursue it. The confusion tolerance that your team has to have has to be great in a good way. They got to be able to be able to deal with uncertainties. So what sort of talent, how does your team look like? How do you bring, what do you bring on board?
It's interesting. So I have someone who worked for me at Disney. So part of my group at Disney created the Magic Band. If you've gone, it's this wonderful little device. So Scott Davis has joined me.
I think that's the largest single investment that that Disney ever made. Right?
Yeah, and kudos to Bob Iger. I remember when we came out and had this idea, and I still say the scratching of the pencil that had the basis for this NGE project. And but there's a person, Bob Iger, who is one of those leaders that isn't afraid to take a bet. So Scott Davis has come. He's terrific. He's highly innovative. Looks at experiences differently. We've taken some people from the core business that are younger in their careers and have a desire to be entrepreneurial, and that's one thing, is that companies do have really good, strong people that can innovate. They just need sometimes a different palette. And so we have two people that have come over from Chick-fil-A. One person helped launch the mobile app, Chick-fil-A One.
Right.
And then we have two people that are based in Seattle. They built a little development center. One person is Josh Borsman. He was one of the tech leads on Amazon Go, so the store that exists in Seattle that you can just walk in and walk out of. He's amazing. He knows sensors and a lot of technology in and around retail. And then we have someone called Sam Stubblefield, who led the group at NBBJ, which is one of the largest architectural firms. And he understands how to create new environments. And then we have some other people that have come from outside the organization. And so it really is a hybrid mix. And the one thing so we have a different team. It's not full of a bunch of people from Chick-fil-A. There's some of those people. Then there's some people from the outside. And then one of the things that we have that I think keeps us honest is, and this is a good thing, is the fact that Dan believes and said that one of the things that's important to create new businesses is the ability to raise capital. So these ideas and these companies will be funded with external capital. And Dan said this one day, and it just kind of hit me. he's never had to go raise money. The company is self-funded, but his dad did, right? His dad, Truett, had to go raise money to get Chick-fil-A going. So it's an important muscle to be able to raise money, to be a real entrepreneur. So as we start birthing companies, and we're going to birth one in about 2 months, it is going to be funded with capital from the outside.
Right.
And I get excited about that. I think that's a really important and different thing for this type of activity. At Coke, all the investments that we made in BB were funded by Coke,
right.
Corporate. It wasn't from outside capital.
So part of it you could say, well, you could say if I don't go outside, it also makes it easier. But almost that external funding, those questions you have to answer, almost force you to, I guess, innovate a little harder if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the venture community is a great community.
Yeah.
I think venture capital has shown the propensity to drive higher levels of innovation than corporations. They see opportunities, I think, better in some cases. And so I think it's a good thing that we need to go out to that market and raise capital, because it pushes and challenges the ideas that we're building and the concepts we're building.
So speaking of kind of building that ecosystem, it's probably a good time to start getting into how you work and this whole aspect of corporate collaboration.
Yeah.
So part of Red Wagon, I know that you do engage with early stage and entrepreneurs and startups, but a big part is also partnering with other corporations to innovate. So why don't you talk a little bit about kind of that concept, and a little bit we'll try to make it come to life a little bit, but talk about this whole corporate collaboration.
Yeah, it's something actually Dan believes a lot in, and I describe that great innovation happens with an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Part of that ecosystem is an ecosystem that is entrepreneurs and VCs, but another under-leveraged component of that ecosystem are other corporations or corporate partners that you could have.
Yeah.
And a company like Chick-fil-A, just like at Coke, is you get exposed to so many other corporations and what's going on. And that is a unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure companies leverage that. Dan certainly does. He constantly connects and has a lot of people that come into the Chick-fil-A ecosystem. And we get to benefit from the fact that we can reach out to any large corporation and they're going to respond, right? We talked about the Chick-fil-A business card. Like if I call someone in a totally different industry and say I'm calling from Red Wagon and we're part of Chick-fil-A, they answer the phone.
Yeah.
And that allows us to start having conversations about things that most people usually can't. And so in one of the concepts that we're working on that would be the basis of a new company, it's a collaboration with a big company in a totally different industry out in the West Coast. And we have a joint development agreement with them, and we've been able to get so far so fast because of that relationship. And so I think the model we're building is really new and different, because it says, how do you leverage the ecosystem that's around a big company? And leverage it better, and not just do the, I'm sharing a business card and maybe we'll do lunch together thing. But you're literally saying, okay, how can I go after a big problem, use the ecosystem of people around a big company and start working on something? And then also, how do you take the ecosystem of VCs and entrepreneurs and push them together? We think if we can do that, then you could make big disruptive companies that are $1 billion plus in size. We're not going after small little things. We're going after big things because we can put those. If you put those ecosystems together, you better be doing something big.
And again, in any big company, it's so easy to just get caught into what you do extremely well. And I guess this is really forcing you, not just forcing you, but leveraging a knowledge base in a different industry to apply to a problem that's maybe foreign to both of you and to solve it.
Yeah.
And so, what maybe we get into, I guess to that, what's different from this and a typical partnership? I mean, you partner with a company just for distribution. This is really about a creative partnership as much as anything else, too, correct?
Yeah, and I think it's actually, I saw a little bit of it at Best Buy.
Yeah.
We had, when the company was going through challenges, we sold a lot of Samsung products. A big part of Samsung sales were based on Best Buy, a big chunk of Microsoft sales. And so when we started having problems, we pulled in that ecosystem and said, how do we think about our business model and think about working with you all differently?
Right.
That to me was the first time I kind of saw that, wow, it's not about partnerships, it's about bringing big companies together and saying, how do I innovate and work on a business model?
Right.
And I think that's what we're trying to do here, which is, how do we look at a new space and look at a new business model and a new approach to going after an opportunity with other big companies.
Right.
And that is different than the typical, if you guys are in big companies, I'm sure you've all done this, we've done the quote-unquote best practice sharing. The best practice sharing is like, we're getting together, we're having a meeting, we're going to exchange business cards, we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to talk about stuff and exchange some presentations, and that's it. And that doesn't really, while that's nice to do and the lunches are nice, that doesn't really drive, a big innovation.
Right.
And so I think you have to put big companies together on a problem and have them put some skin in the game and let them go try to solve a big problem. And I think we're seeing that too with what Amazon's doing in healthcare. They're putting together a coalition of the willing there, big companies to go after the challenges in healthcare. And that's a term I use more often now. I call it a coalition of willing, which is, can you pull together a coalition of willing to go after a problem that you care about?
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you can drive a big business.
Now, how do you get two large organizations to create together? Because one would just partner together in an easy sense, create together, make something totally new, and navigate two corporate cultures, and the politics that come with it, because that's just part of it. How do you help maneuver? How do you maneuver all that?
Yeah, it's not easy. Again, I think it has to have visibility at the CEO level.
Right.
You have to have dedicated budgets, and you ultimately have to be held accountable to creating a new business.
Right.
The thing that I think is so different in our case is we're not doing a project. Ultimately, the collaboration works if a new business is created.
Right.
That's a different standard, and I think if more companies took that approach, I can only imagine the levels of corporate of innovation you would get amongst companies.
Right.
If the filter was, you're not just working on a project, but you're creating a company, and if you create that company, then you'll use some of the similar incentives that entrepreneurs have, which is there's stock in the company for employees, and there's a legal entity, and it's out there doing business independently. If companies did that more often, I think there'd be a ton of growth.
Right.
But what happens is big companies put teams on, and you're working on a project, and that's not how you get after big businesses that could get a couple $100 million in sales or even $1 billion in sales.
And your metric shift too. Now it's
Yeah.
really more what venture capital would be looking for versus traditional corporate metrics.
Yeah.
And so why don't we look, and by the way, in a few minutes here, we'll definitely give everybody a chance to ask plenty of questions, so start getting them ready. But so let's make this come to life then, because I know you're excited. You have something coming up in a few months, so maybe why don't you start framing that a little bit for everyone?
Yeah. So we had a blank canvas. We looked at a bunch of ideas, and there were a lot of bad ideas. We had lots of them.
So there are such things bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad ideas out there, and it's funny when you're married, your wife will always tell you which ideas are bad. But there was one that just popped in front of us. One because when you're at Chick-fil-A, one of the core things about Chick-fil-A is they have a strong customer base of families. A lot of families go to Chick-fil-A. And coming from Best Buy, I was watching all the retail apocalypse, right, happening left and right last year. One of the industries that we thought was intriguing was the toy business. And so at that same time, I'm a 50-year-old guy who's got a 3-year-old kid. And it's my first child, so this is not like marriage number 3, it's marriage number 1. But I took my child to a play center, and I was horrified. And I came back to my office, and I was thinking, wow, there's this family customer of Chick-fil-A, and there's a lot of great data that we have on families.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A actually has the #1 kids meal in the U.S., so I got some data from the core business. Toy selling and retailing was strained at Toys R Us, and I just had this awful experience as a parent. And I said, why are there not better places to go? Why kids deserve better? Shouldn't there be a great experience for a kid?
Right.
And maybe it involves selling a toy, maybe it doesn't, but can we revolutionize the whole play industry? Can we go in and change this industry? Because this industry's got a couple of, I'd say, players that don't have the best incentives.
Right.
And so we put together a concept, and we started pitching the road. I brought Dan along with me on some of these meetings, and we went and met with Viacom, we met with Disney, we met with Nickelodeon, Mattel, the toy companies, talked to the folks at Universal, Comcast, and they all had interest in this idea. And that was our first proof point to say there's something here. Why does this whole industry all of a sudden, care about play, and kids play? Media companies care because it's going to be increasingly difficult to get their brands in front of kids.
Yeah.
And then toy companies care about it because there's fewer and fewer toy stores, and lo and behold, last month Toys R Us said they're going bankrupt. So we thought, gosh, what an opportunity for a new concept around play.
Right.
And that's what we started building over a year ago.
Wow. So when this idea was pitched, even to Dan internally, this is the first true probably proof point of Red Wagon. How was it?
So to Dan's credit, I think he told me not to go work on it. I think he was like, go work on something else. And but that is an important thing, because it's the mark of a great leader who says, I may not see this idea. I think there are maybe bigger ideas to go after, but he empowers the team to go after them.
Right.
And that's what we did. And we started to kind of build it and get more validation, and we, had a successful trial run in a warehouse on Chick-fil-A's campus about a month ago.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of great reviews from parents who brought their kids in, and it's a totally different thing. It's a place where you can let your kid play, and we have play sitters, people that are trained to play with kids, which is a great job. I wish I had one of those when I was younger.
Yeah.
And we have a place where a parent can do some work and be productive and hang out and get a little bit of a break. And so with a cool beverage center. So I call it, the combination of the world's greatest toy store and the world's greatest coffee beverage shop smashed together.
Yeah. So the experience is such that seems like your guiding design element at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
The experience for the family, for the kids, and so forth.
Yeah.
So and so that, if you say what challenges, so I guess as you're challenging the traditional metrics of retail.
Yeah.
Looking at this. But I do want to go back with that. It seems what's important in this is the fact that Dan challenged you, probably made your team even have to innovate a little bit harder.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely. Yeah. I think the one thing when I was at Coke, we studied successful entrepreneurs, and we did this big study. One thing that they all had in common was persistence and unboundless optimism in their idea.
Right.
So you have to be willing to keep going for it, to be passionate around it.
Right.
And we saw that. We saw that when the company bought Vitamin Water and met that team, and they were so driven and believed in what they were doing. We sat with Seth and Barry, who started Honest Tea, the amount of passion that these people had around their product and why it could be so great. that's the stuff that can exist in a big company.
Right.
And you need to have the right leadership group that's okay with letting people go after their ideas.
Right.
Because that's the beginning of what makes a great entrepreneur.
So it seems like even for this concept around play, you're going to have to create a team that's maybe different from a typical whatever, the team with the companies involved or Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, they look totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan uses the term wacko, but we got a lot of people with tattoos, and they don't look like your typical Chick-fil-A employee, and they're weird and different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think embracing diversity and the fact that people, don't have to look, feel, and talk the same is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
I think that's actually what's going to make us successful.
Yeah.
It's like, what an awful world it would be if everyone looked the same.
Right.
We have enough people that can wear khaki pants.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
we can,
You don't need to play in khaki pants.
yes, exactly.
Well, good. Well, I want to open it up for questions for Drew and see. I'm sure there's some out there yet.
You mentioned building experiments behind these ideas. Could you describe some of the experiments behind? You mentioned obviously setting up a warehouse with the hypotheses. How was that structured?
Yeah, experiments are literally, in our case, writing code and having, seeing if we could have a device, in our case a toy, change an environment, and hacking a system together that doesn't exist today. So in our case, we hacked something called Unity, which is a platform to see if we could make that happen. And that's really different. That is something the IT department at most companies would not do. Is go hack software the way we did and put it in front of a consumer. But that's what you have to do. It's like you have to sometimes hack things in a way that IT departments don't want to hack if you want to create next generation retail experiences. The whole IT thing, we did not make a lot of progress at Best Buy until we totally revamped our architecture. Because there was years and years where no change happened because it didn't meet the IT processes and filters.
Right.
And so an experiment is, go take something that is not a scaled approved system that could actually break really fast and put it in front of a consumer and be okay with it.
Right. And how do you make sure that you're not playing it too safe? Because people start, I always like to say people revert to the mean, to the average, and your job is to make sure you're outside of the distribution to some extent.
Well, I think that's why it's good that we are kind of like, that's why I'm always careful when, I say we're Red Wagon at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Is that we're outside of the core so we can go break things. And because if you can't break something, you're not going to innovate.
Right.
And the only way to break something is to put a different logo on it and put it out in the world and hold it to a different standard. That's how you can make a lot of progress. Because it's malfeasance and crazy for any good company to take their brand or business and wildly experiment with it. The amount of damage you would do in equity is insane. You wouldn't do that. That's why I think the model of the future is like, go create a new company, go put a brand on it, go open up a store. If the store is a disaster, that's okay. You're not hurting your base business.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm hoping CEOs start adopting that model, because I've lived in the model at a Kodak, at other places where the innovation doesn't happen because the lawyers get involved and it's like, oh my gosh, what happens if this? We're a big company, we're gonna get sued. And so you have to legally wall off those experiments, and you need to push them out of the ecosystem so you can go and be daring.
Well, it also helps contain your investments to some extent,
Yeah.
too, by walling it out. So while it's a big step, it's also a big control mechanism.
Yeah.
Right over
That's first.
Or,
Hey Drew, you mentioned that you get a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
How do you judge up front the ideas, and how do you know a good idea from a bad idea early on?
If you like them, they're good, right?
Yeah. No, it's funny. There's no magic formula, but I think for us, like in this kids concept, going and talking to the biggest companies in the space, and I remember flying back from one of the meetings on the West Coast, and I was with Scott, and we're like, can you believe that 4 companies want us back? Like, that was just a good filter, because we're like, they should know about this industry. We don't. We're not toy people. We're not kids play people. And the fact that all of them wanted another meeting, that was a great, inexpensive way to validate the idea. And to be honest, that was new to me. I was used to like, okay, let's put a screener online, let's go run it by consumers, and let's try to get some feedback. And so I learned like, wow, this is a different way to kind of try to vet an idea. So.
Hi. With the emphasis of a lot of individuals looking at healthy living and healthy lifestyles, where do you see Chick-fil-A in the future in terms of developing products and services around that area? It's not just food.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask with Chick-fil-A. I know stuff I've heard from Dan. I mean, the company continues to create healthier, better, lower calorie options. Like, I imagine that's going to continue. You know, I think as with any industry, it's hard to predict where people will go. I mean, you know, I was at Coca-Cola. There will be a lot of people that will continue to drink soft drinks for a long time. But, you know, I think if you're in the food and beverage business, you're just going to constantly think about how do I take calories out and lower fat grams and take out preservatives and do all that stuff, because one, is the right thing to do. And I think food science has come a long way to enable that. So
it seems like from a Red Wagon perspective, the play would, I'm not saying you're looking at this, but if you ever look at health, retail health.
Oh, we're selling beverages in our play concept. So we are.
Well, yeah, but even if you look at health centers, there's so many angles that you can potentially take in reinventing, you know, health centers or whatever it is. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's actually an interesting thing. We had a big discussion. Our partner had a visceral reaction to selling Coke in our box, and it was. I'm very honest. People who know me know I typically I'm very forthright and upfront, and we had a debate for 6 hours about whether a mother, like what that would mean to a mother, putting Coke in the box, and these are not easy questions, and they're not easy answers. My wife, by the way, works at Coca-Cola. We got married. We got engaged to the World of Coke. I dressed up as a polar bear, so it was on the face. So the brand means a lot to me, but it's a tough question, because I've been part of that world. I think the product is a good product, but I also am a dad, and when you're launching a kid's concept, you have to think about that. And I was surprised at the reactions that we got with our partner, but they're based in Los Angeles, and they're not based in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think they have, you know, I guess in LA, a much more passionate core of mothers that view beverages differently. And to me, it was really eye-opening, because I think sometimes it's easy when you sit, particularly in Atlanta, and you go down to Buffington Road, where Chick-fil-A is based during the week, and you just, you know, you sometimes don't see different audiences, right? And I was just, your question's an interesting one, because that was been one of my surprises, was that kind of activism around health for moms in our meeting.
Which is the power of the corporate collaboration,
yeah.
And working, getting different insights and perspectives, yeah. and so forth.
Take 2 more questions.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, Drew. I wonder if you could just speak to some of the financial aspects. So you mentioned private equity and looking toward Sandhill and other places for that kind of, we'll call it VC round. But there was a lot of stuff before that. And so when you look at, you know, seed, when you look at a pilot, when you look at proof of concept, is that all funded internally? And like Compass, for example, has about 1% of their gross revenue is focused on innovation. I was wondering if you have a magic number like that for what you're doing.
I think 1% is far too little, to be honest with you. I think given the rate of change that is happening in every industry, I mean, the digitization of most businesses, it's not that hard to go after big companies anymore. I mean, look at what Elon Musk has done in Tesla, look at what Amazon's done. Any big company that's sitting there and saying, I'm putting 1% of my budget in innovation, that's patting themselves in the back, I'm not saying that they are, that's probably too low. It needs to be 5%, 6%. I mean, why should, it needs to be a lot more given the rate of change we're seeing. So that's, hopefully answers one question. I do think, I've been falling madly in love with the different ways to fund an idea. We take things to proof of concept generally within the funds. And then once we have, within our corporate funding, and once we have an idea that's past that, then we say, okay, let's have the external market fund it. And there's a combination of people like Dan, people that are just individuals that want to put money in companies, angel investors that we're working with and talking to. So that whole ecosystem I find to be really interesting because they are, they're driven to kind of take risks because they want a good return, and there's a lot of it. Surprisingly, it is amazing the amount of capital that I see out there to go after good ideas and to back really good teams, and so I'm encouraged by it. So I'm encouraged by it too because again, if we wait for corporations to take their budgets up on innovation, we're not going to get to some great places. That's why I'm excited by the amount of capital that's coming in. There's a large amount of capital from China that's coming in, which has been interesting. I think there's a high degree to go after some spaces from Asian companies that has surprised me.
What process do you use to choose the entrepreneurs that you work with?
The one question I ask when I meet an entrepreneur is, why do you care about this specific problem? I don't care about the technical expertise of someone or their resume or X, Y, and Z. What I learned at Coke, and I think the reason why our bets were really good on who we invested with, it's because they passionately cared about a problem. When we met with Seth at Honest Tea, he passionately cared about, health and things being organic. He lived and breathed it. We spent time with him. We saw how these people live. That's what drives success. So I think you have to care about the industry and you have to care about the problem a whole lot. And if you don't care, you're probably not going to be successful because you have to work, in weird, mysterious ways to make a new idea come to life. And the only thing that's going to keep you going is the passion that you have for that particular problem. So.
Well, Drew, hopefully, at the end of this discussion, people will learn about you. I think there's some great lessons. Those of you who know me or follow me know that I talk consistently about innovators' DNA and corporate innovation and how to really drive change in your companies. Drew is so many incredible insights from Drew. So hopefully you learn how to be a better innovator. I think we definitely learned about the lineage from the Cathy family and Chick-fil-A on innovation. But most importantly, hopefully we'll get excited about what Red Wagon is about. And looking forward over the next few months to hear more about it. So before we turn it over to Jeff, thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was fantastic. And thank you as well, Alex, for hosting. Did a great job asking the questions. So one more round of applause for both Alex and Drew. And Drew, when's the first pilot store going to be open?
We're shooting for November this year in
It's
Atlanta.
going to be in Atlanta.
Yep.
I know where my kids will be in November this year. Looking forward to that. All right, thank you all for coming today. Our next event, our next Enterprise Entrepreneurship Series event is going to be Thursday, May 17th, so just a little bit over a month from today. And we have the head of innovation for a company called Wisdom Tree, who's going to be speaking. You may not have heard of Wisdom Tree, but Wisdom Tree is one of the largest asset management companies in the world. They have over $50 billion in assets underneath their management. They're also one of the largest providers of ETFs in the world. And what's really interesting about Brad's story is Brad was the founder of a startup that became very successful and then got acquired by Wisdom Tree, and through the acquisition, Wisdom Tree promoted him to head of innovation for all of Wisdom Tree. So it's kind of a really neat story about being an entrepreneur, getting acquired, big acquisition, and now leading innovation for a very large company. So that is going to be May 17th at 11:30, and we'll be sending out some details via email on that in terms of location. Would love to have all of you back for that, as well as all of our future events. So thank you all very much for coming today. Appreciate it.